Thank you to Vessi for sponsoring today's video.
Vessis are the perfect shoe for whatever adventures you have planned. Vessis are 100% waterproof and will have your feet dry in the wettest of weather. They are comfortable and stylish enough to wear every day. This sneaker will change your life. They are made from a dual knit material called Dymatex, which keeps you warm in the winter and cool in the summer, and they don't even feel like they should be waterproof. They are functional and lightweight, which makes them the perfect sneaker for traveling. They are sustainably made with less material waste due to the knitting process, less water waste, and no animal byproducts, so they are 100% vegan. The antibacterial insoles keep things fresh, while the cloud-like cushioning keeps things comfy. They are perfect for all seasons, rain or shine. On rainy days, your socks will stay completely dry as you walk through puddles, wet grass, or even snow. Vessis have saved my feet from wet, soggy socks on many occasions. Check Vessi out in the link below and use our code RPR to get $25 off your Vessi shoes.
I don't know what to tell you.
Then plant the spruce right now so we can enjoy them before 30 years.
If you want me to put something across the front, the other thing I can do is I can transplant some of these trees. I can transplant a lot of these trees.
Right now, today.
Yeah, that's fine. If you have to ask yourself, if you really don't want to be anywhere near the road, then I'll put in a switchback and we'll go way up there.
That seems unrealistic though too.
Why?
I don't, just with the snow and everything else that we deal with.
I'd have to plow down the driveway to this spot.
That's what I'm saying.
But it'd be pretty cool. I don't know. I keep thinking about it. I keep thinking about maybe this isn't the spot right here. Maybe this is the first switchback and then we go way back up over there. Look, I had to cut a tree down yesterday that was dying, but it was almost 100-year-old maple. I didn't like that. I don't like cutting down those big old trees because and I'll never see that tree in my lifetime.
I know.
So that tree right there is probably 120 years old. I don't want to touch those trees if I can help it. That's why the switchback thing does interest me. I wouldn't have to take out as many trees.
Mm-hmm. As we get older, like I don't want to be an 80-year-old grandma trying to maneuver myself back through here if you're.
But the truth is,
Cedar,
Cedar,
and the mud, and the mud is my main thing.
I'll put enough gravel down. The truth is, I could put a switchback in that is nowhere near as steep as our driveway is. So it's not like it's a crazy. I think that's the ticket, actually. The more I think about it.
I don't know. I can't think. This is way too stressful for me.
It is so thick, and there's also aspens in here, and I have not touched any of those aspens.
Yeah, don't touch those.
That actually would be the tree to transplant across the front if you wanted to put some aspens in, but
I don't want it to look fake and planted.
It will for a year or two. In one day, I undid what nature spent 100 years or more doing.
I don't like it.
Makes
me ill.
But what is this place going to look like in another 100 years?
We're not going to be here in 100 years.
But I told Rhett yesterday, I'm like, someday your kids or somebody's kids are going to thank me for all this work because I know what's going to happen. We went and saw that place that 50 years ago somebody went through and thinned all the maple trees, and you can see what the trees have done.
But then leave all these trees right here.
Yeah.
Don't cut any more down.
Some of them that are leaning way over, they have to go.
Okay, but you don't have to do that right now. Do that next summer. Get the pad built first.
If I had the excavator, I need to use the excavator.
Use it next summer. You have next summer too. You don't have to do it today. All of it. Right now.
I'm really trying to think about those things, I promise.
Understand that I want all the trees. I don't want any of them to go. I wanted a trail. And that's it. All the rest of the trees can stay.
Okay, so the next time I go over there, just disregard all of the dead trees. Someday they'll be gone, and you'll just have to pretend that that's how it's always looked. And they'll be healthy.
But then I'm going to look across the road and see that what
all
it
the
used
dying
to
trees,
look like.
all the dying trees. I only took out trees that needed to be taken out.
I know. That's what you said this time too. It's not the first time I've heard that.
I did it. And it hurts. I hope I didn't go too deep. I'm trying to get a handle on where the driveway that comes in from the bottom corner of the property, basically where we're going to end up in here. Somewhere up in here I have to pick a location to start digging out a fairly large house pad, but I first have to get this finished up as far as getting this road in. And this big tree, there's the really big tree, which I will not touch. Then there's one that's probably half the diameter of the big one. And as you can see, it's right in the middle of the road. And that's a big old tree. And as much as I hate to cut a tree that big down, we've got a lot of them on this property. And unfortunately, it's part of what has to happen. The good news is that tree is going to give us a lot of warm nights around the fire, because that is a serious amount of firewood in that trunk. And then the other thing that I'm up against right now is I cannot burn any of this stuff. And so however I buck it up and break it down, I have to do this in a way where it can sit and ultimately dry out for probably a month or two. I don't even know. If we have some crazy rainstorm come in that looks like it's going to hang around for a day or so, I should be able to get permission to burn that pile. But once that pile gets big enough, and once it starts to dry out, it becomes a touch dangerous, and I may even have to wait for snow. But this is where I stopped right here, and this is about 2/3 the way across our property. It gets progressively thicker the further we go back in here, but I don't want to be down next to the road, so I want to come up in here somewhere. But it gets thicker and thicker, and wherever we end up, I know Cedar is going to want to come over here and tell me what she thinks. Shortly after closing on our land 6 years ago, I immediately went to work doing stuff like this, but it was all by hand. I didn't have an excavator, I didn't have a backhoe. I found an inexpensive tractor in the middle of that, but it didn't take long to figure out that that tractor was not going to be able to help me a whole lot when it came to getting up the hills, getting the trees cut down, and getting the stumps removed. I went through a few chainsaws before I finally found that right chainsaw that was not too heavy yet powerful enough to get the job done. And I went to work, literally for weeks on end, just cutting wood, piling it up, and burning it. There really wasn't a whole lot more that we could do at that time. Cedar and the kids would come up and help me stack brush and burn it, But really, the family didn't even spend that much time up here during that first year. It was obvious that there was an excessive amount of work simply around cutting down trees and clearing the land. But that didn't scare me off too much. I just wasn't sure how long it was going to take me to get the entire job done, but I knew that it would be worth the effort. Even back then, I knew that for this to work, I would most certainly need pasture for animals to graze. Other than the fact that that tree is leaning, that's a perfect tree. But let me show you where that tree came from. It seems that when these seeds get going, they send up multiple shoots, and then it's basically survival of the fittest. So out of this bunch of maples right here, the only one that will end up making it will be this one. That one in the middle, but it might be 40 years or 30 years that it takes for that to happen. In the meantime, one by one, these things start dying off. Okay, they always get rot up in the tops of them. You can see that, that's dead. So again, that big old tree right there is made it down to where there's only 4 left. So there may have been as many as 20 or 30 in the beginning. This big one is the one that's going to make it. These other guys are going to die at some point. Again, right there. All that I'm doing is trying to speed that process up dramatically. By getting rid of all of these other branches and leaving the main trunk, all that I'm doing is rapidly speeding up a whole bunch of growth, because now the main guy doesn't have to share any of the other resources with all the other trees. The end result is big, beautiful, healthy maples. If you don't thin these trees out, they rot. The ants come in. The ants are really bad. The thicker the trees are, naturally, the more ants you have. The other thing is with these trees, they're not safe because at some point they break off. As a matter of fact, up on our hill by the water tanks this last year, we had a heavy wind come through that normally would not have bothered any of the standalone trees, and it snapped 2 of the branches off of one of these bush maples like this. And because they're so thick, they all have to work so hard for sunlight and for the nutrients that they need to grow. In the middle of everything else, we have these cedars, and they will get big, and so I try to leave those trees alone. All that I really do is prune up as high as I can reach with the chainsaw and get rid of any of the branches. But really, I should get rid of these maple trees that are right close by this cedar tree, but I don't want to. They're too big. So, okay, so here's another example of basically the last one standing. Everything else is dead around it. The only other trees that we do now have on our property are these aspen trees, and those are Cedar's favorite trees. And when I was working back in the back of the property, I found a whole bunch of little aspens, so I think I'm gonna bring a bunch of those down here and transplant them. So I cut off all of the trees that I didn't think would make it, and I tried to leave the good, healthy trees. I really am trying to leave as many of these trees as I can. So now I'm gonna come in here with the excavator and clean up all the brush and pull all the stumps out at the same time. If I leave those stumps, not only will trees come back, but they become trip hazards. They're dangerous. It's not good to get them up underneath the excavator, obviously, so I take them out. It's important to get them out of the ground. In those early days, I would eventually borrow my neighbor's two-wheel drive backhoe, and I could see that that was beneficial, but yet still not quite enough. And that's when I began looking at excavators. But at that time, financially, we were not in a position to go spend a bunch of money on an excavator. During those early days, my brother-in-law and my oldest sister would help me get an excavator, but unfortunately, that excavator ended up being just too big. Somewhere around that 1.5 to 2 year mark, I got an email from New Holland. We worked out a deal where I could use a backhoe for a time and then an excavator. And ultimately, that allowed me to move forward in a way where I had not been able to move forward before. Once I first got that four-wheel drive backhoe, I knew that machine was a game changer. I would end up working out a 2-year partnership with New Holland, and they would let me use a backhoe and an excavator. And having those tools, I was able to get the septic system in, the shallow well dug, the water lines ran up the hill, and the water tanks installed. And I also used the excavator to thin and clear the trees on the hillside behind our house. Using that New Holland equipment showed me that the long-term maintenance on our property would revolve around heavy equipment, and I needed to make preparations to get my own stuff lined up so that when I would need it, it would be there to be used. I am now on my third excavator. I don't even know how many tractors I've had over the last 6 years, but I've now got the tractor that I know is right for the job. And my Kobelco SK70 excavator that's currently sitting at the dealership, waiting to get fixed, I believe is still a great excavator for the job. But letting the summer slip by when there's so much work to be done with an excavator means that I need to find another excavator. But because of how the market is right now, ultimately supply and demand has taken over, and excavators are probably 20% higher than they should be. I nearly bought a Yanmar 80 series excavator about 1.5 years ago for $30,000. That same exact excavator just sold for $40,000. So in the meantime, I get to use a rental excavator from one of the local rental companies. It's undersized, but ultimately it's an excavator and it works. I've said this before and I'll say it again, but the truth is, if it was easy, everybody would be doing it. I don't think that what we're doing here is anything spectacular above and beyond the fact that it just requires that you don't give up. I don't know where the next excavator I need is going to come from, but I promise you this. I'm going to find it before summer's over so I can get more work done. It seems that over the last 6 years, this has kind of been the process. Challenges followed by moments of success, followed by more challenges. But giving up was not an option. Using heavy equipment like an excavator to clear the land simply speeds up the process in which it takes to get the land usable. I spent 2 years doing this the first time. So far, I've spent about 2 weeks on this land. Let me just kind of show you what happens when the forest is not maintained in any way, shape, or form. You can't walk through it. Everything grows sideways, all trying to get to the sky, and then a few of them make it. I couldn't get a four-wheeler through here. I can barely walk through here. You get scraped up as you come through here. Since we put that fence in up there, I found myself looking at cutter heads that could be used on the end of an excavator. And in the middle of that, I found myself looking at a grinder as well that could go on the end of a boom of an excavator. But with maple trees, if you don't get the stumps out of the ground, something comes back every time. But I'm certain it's worth doing. And I promise someday my lovely wife Cedar will recognize that there was just no easy way to do this, and that ultimately the trees that were left behind benefited from what I did. I don't know anybody else around here that has the quantity of maples that we do that has actually taken the time to do this. There's a number of other people that have maple groves on their property, but nobody has really, at least on the scale that I want to do it, nobody has taken the time to do this because most people don't have the time, number one, and number two, I think in the old days they would clear cut it and they would just either drag a big giant chain behind a couple of dozers, or they would literally just go up and clear cut it. About 7 or 8 years ago, when we first moved to the community, there was a fire that got out of control by the Forest Service, which now boundaries the land that we own. But the Forest Service was clear cutting the maples and burning them so that the Cattlemen's Association would have more grass or feed, I'm assuming. I don't know that for a fact, but there's no other reason for them to be clear cutting and burning those maples. But they see those maples as invasive, and they're a handful. They're hard to work with, but in the few places where people have had the time and paid the attention to doing something like this, the results are mind-blowing in not that much time. Again, the hillside behind us is kind of a science project as we watch the grasses take over and slowly push the weeds out. But the way I see it, this is the price that I get to pay for living where I want to live. This is the price I get to pay for having a little bit of pasture. This is the price I get to pay for having big, beautiful, healthy maple trees. I'm more than prepared to pay that price. I cannot see how what I am doing to these trees could in any way be bad for the land in the long term. But in the short term, it can be painful to watch. So as I work with the excavator to handpick which trees stay and which trees must go, I try to be as sensitive as I possibly can to my wife first, and then simply what is best for our place long term, because I know at some point down the road someone else is going to benefit from all this work that I'm doing. On our next upcoming video, you will get to see the conclusion of this particular project and what in fact happened after I hit my foot with the chainsaw. The good news is I have since returned the rental excavator and I'm getting around, although it's painful. This week I'll get back on the siding and get that finished up. Then we'll get to the solar panels. Then I think we're going to start working on that rock retaining wall. But throughout the summer, I will come back to this property and continue to work on it until we get it cleaned up completely. One of the cool things that I keep stumbling on as I'm working right here is the boulders all over. I think this is the spot where the switchback is going to start, and I'm hoping that as we move some dirt around that we find even more boulders. I've already found probably 20 or 30 boulders that I'll use over there on the wall, but after talking with Cedar, I think the switchback is where it's at. What the switchback does is gets us quite a bit higher up the hill. Why don't we do multiple switchbacks? I guess, I don't know. We could go crazy with this if I wanted to, but getting it a few hundred feet up the hill wouldn't hurt my feelings at all. For a guy like me, the best part about this are just the simple possibilities and trying to figure out what we can do. Of course, I have to be sensitive to my wife's feelings. All right, this is the end of day 3. I still have 2 full days left before I have to take it back. The next couple of days, I'm just going to kind of condense everything. I may cut down a few more trees up in here. Now the next big concern is watching all this brush get drier and drier and getting more vulnerable. So hopefully we can get a little bit of rain in the forecast and I can get some stuff burned up. But anyway, so far so good. That machine's a little bit small. I wish it was that machine's probably right around 8,500, 9,000 pounds, something like that. Once you step up a couple of sizes and you're around that 12,000 pounds, you have a longer track and a much wider track base, and so it's a lot safer. So that's the kind of machine, I shouldn't even say it, but that's the kind of machine that gets tipped over pretty easily. So I gotta be careful. Hip, cow. Get out of there. Hip, cow. Hip, 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 hip. Hip, hip. Good cow. Come on. Get up. Let's go. Come on, Ruby. Get up. Good girl, Ruby. Come on, Ruby, let's go. Come on, let's go. Okay, today is Thursday, day 4, and this is the new corner of the property right in here, and this is where those trees get so thick that you just can't even walk through them. And most of those trees have something wrong with them. So I'm still trying to hand pick 2 or 3 trees that I can leave and let get big, but the truth is most of those trees are probably going to have to go, because this is right where the corner post for the fencing is going to go and then start going up the hill. So today my goal is to get that line clearly established, get any trees removed and go up the hill a little ways. And then it's basically cleanup. What I have to do now is kind of consolidate all these piles of trees and brush so that when I do get permission to burn, I can have them fairly close by. I'll probably try and move a lot of these brush piles up to where I originally burned the brush pile, but it's not very fun. Moving brush around is not the funnest job on the place, that's for sure. But doing this stuff is not easy work. Even sitting in the excavator, it beats you up because that excavator is not quite as heavy as I'd like it to be. It moves around a little bit, and by the end of the day, it's almost as bad sitting in the excavator as it is running a chainsaw. But what I have found is I am much more effective when I use the chainsaw first. What I have found is doing it that way is much easier on the excavator. I used to just kind of get up next to the trees and use the excavator and the length of the tree to pull it out of the ground. but that way was quite a bit harder on the machines. So what I hope to accomplish is a delicate balance between grass and trees. Ultimately, as we try to be as independent as we can, I need grass to feed animals, whether it's goats, whether it's sheep, or maybe even cows at some point in time. I have to have the pasture in combination with the trees to feed these animals, which you don't see around here. You never see maple trees scattered through a pasture. You see clear-cut, wide open pastures where animals might have all the feed that they need, but if there were ever any maple trees left on some of these old farms and ranches, most of them have been removed to make the pastures more efficient, I suppose. But these maple trees also produce the most amazing topsoil. So like I said, it's kind of a delicate balance here, but it's a bit painful during the early part of the process, tearing stuff down. But the end result should be really, really cool.